The gunshot split the morning air before Elena Thorne even had time to register the danger, and her hand was already on her father's Colt revolver, thumb cocking the hammer as she dropped behind the water trough in one fluid motion that would have made him proud. The year was 1878, and Hachita, New Mexico, was the kind of place where a woman needed to know how to fight if she wanted to survive, let alone keep the ranch her father had left her when consumption took him 6 months back. She was 22 years old, alone except for three ranch hands who were more interested in stealing her cattle than protecting them, and now someone was shooting at her in broad daylight on the main street. Another shot kicked up dust 3 inches from her boot. Elena counted to three, then rolled left and came up with the revolver extended, squeezing off 2 rounds toward the alley where the shooter had taken cover. Her father had taught her to shoot before she could properly read, had shown her how to move, how to think, how to turn fear into action. The lessons had been daily rituals, him standing behind her at the fence post targets, adjusting her stance, teaching her to breathe through the moment when most people froze. The shooting stopped. Elena waited, heart hammering against her ribs, sweat trickling down her spine despite the cool November morning. She heard boots running, moving away fast, and only then did she allow herself to straighten up. Her hands were steady, she noticed with some satisfaction. Her father would have been proud of that too. "You all right, miss?" The voice came from behind her, and Elena spun around, revolver coming up again before she could think better of it. The man who had spoken raised both hands slowly, carefully, his dark eyes never leaving hers. He wore dusty trail clothes and a black hat that had seen better days, and there was a star pinned to his vest. Not a marshal's star, she noted, but a deputy's badge from some other territory. "I am perfectly fine," Elena said, not lowering the gun. "Who are you?" "Name is Dawson Yale. Just rode into town about 10 minutes ago." He nodded toward the alley where the shooter had disappeared. "Saw the whole thing from the hotel porch. You handle yourself pretty well." "My father taught me." Elena finally lowered the revolver, though she did not holster it. "What brings a deputy to Hachita?" Dawson Yale lowered his hands slowly. He was tall, she noticed, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar and a face that managed to be both weathered and young at the same time. He could not have been much older than her, maybe 25 at most. "Not a deputy anymore," he said, and there was something in his voice that suggested a story he was not ready to tell. "Just a cowboy looking for work. Heard there might be ranches hiring in this area." Elena studied him for a long moment. She needed help, that was certain. The 3 men she had currently could not be trusted, and running a ranch alone was proving harder than her stubborn pride had wanted to admit. But trusting a stranger, especially one who had just happened to arrive the same day someone tried to kill her, seemed foolish at best. "I might know of a place," she said carefully. "But first, I need to figure out who just tried to put a bullet in me." "Probably one of Garrett's men," said a voice from the doorway of the general store. Old Marcus Webb stepped out onto the boardwalk, his white beard stained yellow from tobacco. He had known Elena since she was a child, had been friends with her father. "Been hearing talk that he wants your land. Water rights mostly. Your ranch sits on the best creek for 20 miles. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. James Garrett owned the largest spread in the territory. Thousands of acres of grazing land that stretched almost to the Arizona border. He was rich, powerful, and utterly ruthless. If he wanted her property, she was in more trouble than just a few disloyal ranch hands. "He cannot just shoot me and take it," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew how naive they sounded. Marcus shook his head sadly. "Law is pretty thin out here, Elena. You know that. Your daddy kept Garrett off because he was tough and everyone knew it. But with him gone..." He trailed off, not needing to finish the thought. Dawson Yale was watching her with those dark eyes, and Elena got the distinct impression he was seeing more than she wanted to reveal. "How big is your spread?" he asked. 2,000 acres. Good grassland, plenty of water. My father built it from nothing over 20 years. She heard the defensive note in her voice and hated it. I am not selling, and I am not running. Did not figure you for the running type, Dawson said. There was no mockery in his tone, just a statement of fact. But you are going to need help if Garrett is making a move. How many men do you have? 3, maybe. Elena holstered her revolver finally, making a decision that was probably crazy but felt inevitable. You said you were looking for work. Can you actually do ranch work, or were you just a badge carrier? Something flickered across Dawson's face, quick as lightning. I grew up on a ranch in Colorado. Worked cattle before I ever pinned on a star. I can rope, ride, brand, break horses, fix fence, and just about anything else you need. He paused. And I can handle a gun when necessary, though I had my fill of shooting for a while. That last part made Elena curious, but she pushed the curiosity aside for the moment. Pay is $30 a month plus meals and a bunk. Work is hard, and right now it is probably dangerous. If you want to walk away, now would be the time. Dawson Yale smiled for the first time, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Elena's heart do an unexpected flip. Miss, I just watched you take cover and return fire without hesitation. I think I will take my chances. When do I start? Right now, Elena said. We need to get back to the ranch before someone else decides to take another shot at me. They took the back streets to the livery where Elena had left her horse, a sturdy bay mare named Copper. Dawson's mount was a tall roan gelding that looked like it had plenty of staying power. They rode out of Hachita, heading west, following the dusty road that wound through scrub brush and rocky outcroppings. The November sun was climbing higher, warming the air but not making it hot. This was Elena's favorite time of year in New Mexico, when the brutal summer heat finally broke and the air turned clear and crisp. So what made you give up the badge? Elena asked after they had ridden in silence for a while. She normally was not one to pry, but something about Dawson Yale made her curious. Maybe it was the sadness she had glimpsed in his eyes, or maybe it was just that she had not had anyone to talk to in months except ranch hands who resented taking orders from a woman. Dawson was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, I was deputying up in Colorado, in a mining town called Silver Creek. Good job, mostly keeping drunks from killing each other, breaking up fights, that sort of thing. Then one day, the marshal and I got word that there was going to be trouble at the mine. Workers were planning to strike, and the owner had brought in armed men to stop them. He paused, his jaw tightening. We rode out to try to keep the peace. It went bad fast. Shooting started, and when it was over, 6 men were dead, including the marshal who had been like a father to me. The mine owner claimed the workers had fired first. The workers said the hired guns opened up without warning. I knew the truth, knew which side was lying. But the owner had money and influence, and I was just a deputy. Elena waited, sensing there was more. I testified to what I saw, Dawson continued. Got called a liar by men who mattered. Got threats against my life. Finally, the judge decided there was not enough evidence to prosecute anyone. The owner kept his mine. The workers who survived scattered. And I realized that sometimes the law does not serve justice. It serves whoever has the most money. He looked at her then, and his eyes were hard. So I turned in my badge and left. Been drifting since then, doing cowboy work when I can find it. Figured that was more honest than wearing a star I did not believe in anymore. Elena understood that kind of disillusionment. That moment when you realized the world was not the fair and just place you had been raised to believe in. She had felt it when her father died, and the men who worked for him suddenly decided they did not need to listen to his daughter. She felt it every time she rode into town and saw the way men looked at her, either with contempt or with the kind of hunger that made her skin crawl. I am sorry about your marshal, she said quietly. Losing someone like that, someone who matters, it changes everything. Yeah, Dawson said, it does. They rode on in companionable silence after that, and Elena found herself relaxing despite the morning's violence. There was something solid about Dawson Yale, something that made her feel less alone than she had in months. She shook off the feeling. She could not afford to get soft, not now when everything she had was under threat. The Thorne Ranch came into view as they crested a low rise. It was not much to look at from a distance, just a collection of buildings clustered around a creek that flowed year-round. But to Elena, it was everything. The ranch house her father had built with his own hands, the barn he had raised beam by beam, the corrals where she had learned to ride, the fields where she had worked beside him every day of her life until consumption had stolen him away. "Nice spot," Dawson said, and she could hear the appreciation in his voice. A real cowboy could recognize good land when he saw it. "Best in the territory," Elena said with pride. Then reality crashed back in, which is why Garrett wants it so badly. As they rode down toward the buildings, Elena saw her 3 ranch hands standing by the barn. They had obviously not been working. Luther Kane was the oldest, a hard-faced man of about 40 who had worked for her father for years. The other 2 were younger, brothers named Jack and Tom Morrison, who had signed on just before her father died. All 3 men watched her approach with expressions that made Elena's hand drift towards her revolver. "Luther," she said as she dismounted, "this is Dawson Yale. He is hired on as of today." Luther's eyes narrowed. "We did not discuss taking on new men." "I am the owner," Elena said flatly. "We do not need to discuss it. I am telling you how it is." Jack Morrison spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Seems like you are collecting strays, Miss Thorne. First you keep us on even though we all know you cannot afford proper wages. Now you are hiring more men. Where is the money coming from?" It was a direct challenge, and they all knew it. Elena felt her temper rising, but forced it down. Losing control now would be a mistake. "My finances are not your concern. Your concern is doing the work you are paid for, which from what I can see, you have not been doing much of lately." Tom Morrison stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun belt. "Maybe we are tired of taking orders from a woman. Maybe we think it is time someone ran this place properly." The air went very still. Elena was aware of Dawson beside her, felt him shift slightly, positioning himself. She could handle this herself, she knew. Her father had taught her more than just shooting. He had taught her to never back down, never show fear, because the moment men sensed weakness, they would tear you apart. "If you do not want to take orders from me, you are welcome to collect whatever wages you have coming and ride out," Elena said. Her voice was cold, hard. "But if you think you are going to intimidate me into selling or into letting you run things, you are going to be disappointed." Luther Kane laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. "You think you can run us off? 3 against 1? Even with your new friend here, those are not good odds." "Actually," Dawson said, speaking for the first time, "I think you will find they are better than you imagine." His voice was mild, conversational, but there was steel underneath it. "See, I have been watching you 3 since we rode up. The way you stand, the way you wear your guns. Luther, you are not a gunfighter, you are a bully. You could beat a woman in a fair fight, maybe. But we are not talking about a fair fight. Jack, Tom, you 2 are followers, not leaders. You will do whatever Luther tells you, but you do not have the sand for real trouble." He took a step forward, and suddenly he seemed much larger than he had a moment before. "Now, here is what is going to happen. You are going to apologize to Miss Thorne, you are going to go back to work, or you are going to collect your time and ride out. What you are not going to do is threaten her again, because if you do, you will be dealing with me, and I promise you that is not something you want." The silence stretched out. Elena barely breathed. She saw Luther's hand twitch toward his gun, saw the calculation in his eyes. Then Tom Morrison broke. "Hell with this," he said. "Come on, Jack. I am not getting shot over $30 a month." He turned and headed for the bunkhouse. Jack hesitated, then followed his brother. Luther stared at Elena for a long moment, hatred burning in his eyes. "This is not over," he said. Yes, Elena replied. It is. Get your things and go. Luther stalked off, and Elena let out a breath she had not known she was holding. Thank you, she said to Dawson. Though I could have handled it myself. I know, Dawson said. But you do not have to handle everything alone anymore. That is what you hired me for, is it not? Elena looked at him, this stranger who had appeared in her life just when she needed help most, and felt something shift inside her. It was not just gratitude, though there was that. It was recognition, a sense that maybe, just maybe, here was someone who understood what it meant to fight for something that mattered. Come on, she said. Let me show you around before those three clear out. I want to make sure they do not steal anything on their way out. The ranch tour took about an hour. Elena showed Dawson the house, the barn, the corrals, the pastures where her cattle should have been grazing, except most of them seemed to have wandered off or been stolen. She showed him the creek that made the property so valuable, clear cold water flowing down from the mountains. She showed him everything her father had built, and with each thing she showed him, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing harder on her shoulders. By the time Luther, Jack, and Tom rode out, the sun was past noon, and Elena's stomach was growling. Can you cook? She asked Dawson. Well enough to keep from starving, he said. Can you? My father taught me everything he knew, Elena said, which unfortunately did not include much about cooking. He hired that done when he could afford it. They ended up in the ranch house kitchen, which was small but well appointed. Elena found some beans, some bacon, some cornmeal for bread. It was rough fare, but it was enough. They worked together in a surprisingly comfortable silence, and when they sat down to eat at the worn wooden table, Elena realized it was the first meal she had shared with someone in months. So, Dawson said, mopping up bean juice with a piece of cornbread. 3 ranch hands just quit, which means we are severely short on help. You have cattle that need rounding up, fence that needs fixing, and a powerful man who wants you gone. What is your plan? Elena had been thinking about exactly that question all day. First, we secure the property. Post guards at night make sure no one is stealing cattle or sabotaging anything. Second, we round up what stock we have left and move them closer to the house where we can watch them. Third, we go into town and file a complaint with the sheriff about the shooting this morning. Sheriff is probably in Garrett's pocket, Dawson said. Probably, Elena agreed. But we do it anyway. So there is a record. And fourth, we find more help. Good men we can trust. That is going to be the hard part, Dawson said. Most cowboys around here are going to know about Garrett's interest in your place. They will not want to cross him. Elena set down her fork. Then we find men who are not from around here. Drifters like you. Men who do not care about local politics, who just want honest work for honest pay. Dawson studied her across the table. You are not going to give up, are you? This is my home, Elena said simply. My father gave his life building it. I am not going to let James Garrett take it just because he is rich and powerful and thinks he can intimidate me into selling. He is not going to stop at intimidation, Dawson warned. The shooting this morning, that was just a warning. Next time they will not miss. Then I will shoot back, Elena said. And I will not miss either. Dawson laughed, and it was a warm, genuine sound that filled the kitchen. You know what, Miss Thorne? I think you just might pull this off. Call me Elena, she said. If we are going to be working together, might as well drop the formalities. Elena, Dawson repeated, and something about the way he said her name made her pulse quicken. And you can call me Dawson, or Yale if you prefer. Most people do. Dawson, Elena said, testing it out. It felt right in her mouth. They spent the rest of the afternoon working. Dawson proved to be as good as his word, moving through ranch chores with the easy competence of someone who had been doing them all his life. He fixed a broken stall door, repaired a section of corral fence, and checked over the few horses left in the barn. Elena worked beside him and found herself enjoying the simple physicality of the labor, the way it pushed thought aside and left only action. As the sun began to set, painting the New Mexico sky in shades of orange and purple, they stood together by the corral fence and looked out over the land. "Your father built something good here," Dawson said quietly. "Something worth fighting for." Elena felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back angrily. She could not afford weakness, not now. He always said that land was the only thing that mattered, that people would come and go, but land endured. As long as you had land and water, you could build a life. He was right, Dawson said. And he raised a daughter strong enough to keep that life going. Not many men would have thought to teach a girl everything he taught you. He said the world was changing, Elena said, that women were going to need to know how to protect themselves, how to stand on their own. He said he would rather I knew how to shoot and never needed it, than needed it and did not know how. Smart man, Dawson said. He turned to look at her, and in the fading light, his eyes were very dark. Show me what you know. Elena's heart jumped. What? Your father's teachings. Show me what he taught you. If we are going to be defending this place together, I need to know what you can do. It was a reasonable request, but something about it felt like more than just practicality. It felt like a test, or maybe an invitation. Elena nodded slowly. All right, go get 2 rifles from the house. There is a shooting range set up behind the barn. 10 minutes later, they stood together at the range her father had built, a series of targets set up at various distances from 50 to 200 yards. The light was fading fast, but there was still enough to shoot by. Dawson handed Elena one of the rifles, a Winchester that had been her father's favorite. Show me, he said again. And this time Elena understood. This was not about proving herself, not really. This was about trust, about showing him who she really was. She loaded the rifle with swift, practiced movements, brought it to her shoulder, and fired 5 shots in rapid succession. Every target rang as the bullet struck home. She lowered the rifle and looked at Dawson, whose eyebrows had climbed toward his hairline. Your father taught you well, he said. Now you, Elena said, handing him the rifle. Dawson took his time, aimed carefully, and matched her shot for shot. When he finished, he was grinning. It has been a while since I met someone who could shoot like that. It has been a while since I met someone worth shooting with, Elena replied, and realized with a start that she was flirting. When had she started flirting? They walked back to the house together as darkness settled over the ranch. Inside, Elena lit lamps while Dawson checked the doors and windows, making sure everything was secure. It felt domestic, comfortable, and a little bit dangerous. I will take first watch, Dawson said. You should get some sleep. It has been a long day. Wake me in 4 hours, Elena said. We will split the night. Elena, we split it, she said firmly. I am not some fragile flower who needs protecting. We are partners in this, equal. Dawson studied her for a moment, then nodded. 4 hours, I will wake you. Elena went to her room, which was small and sparse, containing only a bed, a dresser, and a chair. She took off her gun belt and boots, but slept in her clothes, knowing she might need to move fast. Despite her exhaustion, sleep was slow to come. She kept thinking about Dawson Yale, about the way he had stood beside her against Luther and the others, about the way his eyes had looked in the fading light when he said, "Show me what you know." She had not thought about a man in that way in longer than she cared to admit. Ranch life did not leave much room for romance, and most of the men she knew were either too old, too young, too crude, or too intimidated by her to be interesting. But Dawson was different. He was not intimidated, but he was not trying to dominate her either. He treated her like an equal, like someone whose skills and opinions mattered. It was, Elena realized, exactly what she had been looking for without knowing she was looking for it. She must have dozed off eventually, because the next thing she knew, someone was shaking her shoulder. She came awake instantly, hand reaching for the gun on her nightstand. Easy, Dawson's voice said in the darkness. It is just me, your watch. Elena sat up, rubbing her eyes. Anything happen? Quiet as the grave, Dawson said. I did a circuit around the buildings every half hour. No sign of anyone. Good, Elena said. She stood up, stretching muscles that had stiffened. Get some sleep. I will wake you if there is trouble. Dawson hesitated in the doorway. Elena, thank you. For what? For trusting me. For giving me this job. I needed it more than you know. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest. Get some sleep, Dawson. The night passed slowly. Elena did her own circuits around the property, rifle in hand, every sense alert for danger. The ranch was peaceful under the stars. The only sounds, the wind through the brush and the occasional lowing of a cow in the distance. It gave her time to think, to plan, to worry. By the time dawn broke pink and gold over the eastern horizon, Elena had made several decisions. First, they needed to go into town today and officially report the shooting, whether the sheriff was in Garrett's pocket or not. Second, they needed to start gathering what cattle they could find and moving them closer to the house. And third, she needed to figure out her finances and see just how long she could afford to keep going. That last one was the most worrying. Her father had left her some money, but not much, and the ranch was not profitable enough yet to sustain itself. She had maybe 3 months before she would have to start selling cattle or land just to eat. And if Garrett knew that, which he probably did, he could just wait her out, unless she found a way to make the ranch profitable quickly, or unless she found allies who could help her stand against Garrett long enough to get through the winter. Dawson emerged from the bunkhouse as the sun was fully up, looking surprisingly well rested for a man who had only slept 4 hours. Morning, he said. Coffee? God, yes, Elena said. They made coffee and a simple breakfast of bacon and eggs from Elena's chickens. Then they saddled up and rode toward Hachita. The morning was cool and clear, perfect riding weather, and Elena found herself relaxing despite everything. There was something about being on horseback in open country that always made the world feel more manageable. The sheriff's office in Hachita was a small adobe building on the main street. Sheriff Tom Daniels was behind his desk when they walked in, a heavy man in his 50s with a handlebar mustache and tired eyes. He looked up when they entered, and Elena saw resignation cross his face. Miss Thorne, he said. What can I do for you? Someone shot at me yesterday morning, Elena said. Right here on the main street. I am here to file an official complaint. Daniels sighed. Did you see who it was? No, they were shooting from the alley. Then how do you expect me to investigate? Daniels spread his hands. No witnesses, no identification, no evidence. Could have been anyone. It was one of Garrett's men, Elena said flatly. You got proof of that? Everyone knows Garrett wants my land. Wanting and doing are two different things, Miss Thorne. Daniels leaned back in his chair. Look, I am sorry about the trouble you have been having, but without evidence there is nothing I can do. My advice would be to think about selling to Garrett. He has made you a fair offer. Fair? Elena's voice rose. He is trying to steal my ranch. My father built that place from nothing. Your father is dead, Daniels said, not unkindly. And running a ranch is hard work, especially for a woman alone. There is no shame in selling and moving on. Dawson spoke for the first time. Sheriff, are you seriously telling her that she should just give up because someone shot at her? Daniels looked at Dawson with something like pity. Who are you? Dawson Yale. I work for Miss Thorne. Then you should give her the same advice, Daniels said. Garrett is not going to stop. He has the money, the men, and the influence. Fighting him is just going to get people hurt or killed. Elena turned and walked out before she said something she would regret. Dawson followed her onto the boardwalk, where she stood breathing hard, fists clenched. He is in Garrett's pocket, just like you said, she managed finally. Looks that way, Dawson agreed. So the law is not going to help. We are on our own. Story of my life, Elena said bitterly. Then she shook her head. Sorry, I am not usually this self-pitying. I just thought maybe there would be some justice. Justice is something you make yourself, Dawson said. I learned that the hard way. They were about to head for their horses when a voice called out from across the street. Miss Thorne, wait a moment, please. Elena turned to see a young man hurrying toward them. He was maybe 20 years old, dressed in clean but worn clothes with sandy hair and an earnest face. She did not recognize him. Miss Thorne, my name is Ben Collins, the young man said, slightly out of breath. I heard you were looking for ranch hands. I am a hard worker, good with horses and cattle, and I am not afraid of trouble. Elena studied him. Where are you from, Ben Collins? Texas originally. Been working my way west, taking jobs where I can find them. Heard about your situation and thought maybe you could use help. He met her eyes steadily. I do not like bullies, Miss Thorne. My daddy lost his place to a man like Garrett, lost it because he could not fight back alone. I swore I would never stand by and watch that happen again if I could help it. Dawson was watching the young man with an appraising eye. You can handle a gun? Well enough, Ben said. I am better with a rope and a horse, but I can shoot if I need to. Elena made a decision. 30 a month, meals in a bunk. Work is hard, and it might get dangerous. You still interested? Ben's face split into a grin. Yes, madam. When do I start? Right now, Elena said. We are heading back to the ranch. You have a horse? Yes, madam. I will get him and meet you at the edge of town. As Ben hurried off, Dawson said quietly, You trust him? Not yet, Elena said. But I trust my instincts, and they say he is genuine. Besides, we need help, and beggars cannot be choosers. Fair enough, Dawson said. Just keep your guard up until we know for sure. They collected Ben and his horse, a compact buckskin gelding, and rode back to the ranch together. Along the way, Ben asked questions about the ranch, about the work, about what had happened to Elena's father. He seemed genuinely interested, and Elena found herself liking him despite her natural caution. Back at the ranch, they spent the afternoon rounding up what cattle they could find. It was hard, dusty work, and by sunset they had gathered about 50 head into the pasture closest to the house. It was not nearly all of Elena's stock, but it was a start. That night, they ate together at the long table in the ranch house kitchen, the three of them tired and sore, but satisfied with the day's work. Ben was a cheerful presence, full of stories about his travels and his family back in Texas. Dawson was quieter, but Elena noticed the way he watched everything, always alert, always aware. She also noticed the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention. It made her pulse quicken and her thoughts scatter. After dinner, they set up a watch rotation. Ben would take the first watch, Dawson the second, Elena the third. It meant less sleep for everyone, but it also meant the ranch would be protected around the clock. Elena lay in her bed that night, listening to the sounds of the house settling, and thought about how much her life had changed in just 2 days. She was no longer alone. She had help, had people she might be able to trust, had a chance at making this work. She also had something she had not expected to find, the beginning of hope. The next few days fell into a pattern. They worked from dawn to dusk, rounding up cattle, fixing fence, doing all the endless tasks that a ranch required. Ben proved to be as good as his word, a tireless worker with a natural way with horses. Dawson was solid and reliable, the kind of man you could count on no matter what. And Elena felt herself growing stronger, more confident, as she realized she did not have to carry the entire weight alone anymore. But the threat from Garrett was never far from their minds. On the 4th day, they found 2 cows shot and left to rot in the far pasture. On the 5th day, someone cut a section of fence and drove off about 20 head of cattle. Each incident was small, but the message was clear. Garrett was not going away, and he was not going to play nice. We need to hit back, Ben said one evening as they discussed the situation. Show them we are not going to be pushed around. Hit back how? Elena asked. Ride over to Garrett's place and start a war. Maybe not a war, Ben said, but something. We cannot just sit here and let them pick us apart piece by piece. Dawson had been quiet, but now he spoke up. He is right, Elena. Passive defense is not going to work. Garrett will just keep escalating until he forces you out or forces a confrontation on his terms. We need to take the initiative. What do you suggest? Elena asked. Information, Dawson said. We need to know what Garrett is planning, when he is planning to move, who his key people are. Right now we are reacting. We need to start acting. You mean spy on him? Ben's eyes lit up. I could do that. I could ride over to his ranch, maybe hire on as a hand. Too dangerous, Elena said immediately. If they figured out who you were, you would disappear. She is right, Dawson said, but there are other ways to gather information. Saloons are good places to hear things. Men drink, they talk. We could take turns going into town, keeping our ears open. Elena nodded slowly. That could work, and there are other ranchers in the area who might know something. Small operators like me, people who might have had trouble with Garrett too. You could talk to them, Dawson said. Woman to man might work better than cowboy to cowboy. Less threatening. They made a plan. Elena would visit the neighboring ranches over the next few days, feeling out the situation and looking for potential allies. Dawson and Ben would take turns going into Hachita, drinking in the saloon, and listening to what people said. They would be careful, cautious, and they would share everything they learned. It was not much of a plan, but it was better than sitting and waiting for the next attack. Over the next week, Elena visited every small ranch within a day's ride. What she found was sobering. Every single rancher had a story about Garrett: stolen cattle, damaged property, men intimidated or beaten. One older couple had lost their son when he tried to stand up to Garrett's men. Another family had sold out for pennies on the dollar rather than face more harassment. No one had been able to stop him because Garrett was too powerful, too connected, and too ruthless. But she also found something else: anger. Every person she talked to was angry about what Garrett had done, angry about the injustice of it, angry about their own helplessness. And when Elena suggested that maybe, just maybe, if they all stood together, they could resist him, she saw hope kindle in their eyes. It would take coordination, said John Mercer, who ran a small spread about 10 miles from Elena's place. And someone would have to take the lead, which means putting a target on their back. I already have a target on my back, Elena said. Garrett wants my water rights, and he is not going to stop until he gets them. So I am going to fight. The question is whether I fight alone or with help. Mercer looked at his wife, who nodded. Count us in, he said. Whatever you need. By the time Elena rode home that evening, she had commitments from 6 small ranchers, representing maybe 100 armed men if it came to that. It was not an army, but it was something. Meanwhile, Dawson and Ben had been gathering information in town. What they learned was disturbing. Garrett was planning something big, something that would happen within the next 2 weeks. They could not get specifics, but the word was that Garrett was bringing in more hired guns, men with reputations for violence. He is going to make a major move, Dawson said as they sat around the kitchen table, sharing what they had learned. Probably try to run us off the land by force, then claim we abandoned the property. He cannot do that, Elena said. There are laws. Laws do not matter if the sheriff is in his pocket and there are no witnesses, Dawson said gently. We need to be ready for anything. Elena looked at the 2 men who had become so important to her in such a short time. Ben with his youth and enthusiasm, Dawson with his steady strength. She thought about the ranchers who had agreed to stand with her, about her father's legacy, about everything that was at stake. Then we prepare, she said. We fortify the ranch. We stockpile ammunition and supplies. We make sure we can defend this place if we have to. And we get word to our allies so they will be ready to help if Garrett makes his move. They spent the next several days preparing for siege. They reinforced the doors and windows of the ranch house, set up defensive positions in the barn and outbuildings, cached supplies and ammunition at strategic points around the property. They moved all the cattle they had managed to gather into the pasture closest to the house where they could be protected, and they waited. It was during this time, during the long nights of watch duty and the tense days of preparation, that Elena found herself growing closer to Dawson. They worked side by side, often in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that did not need to be filled with words. She learned that he was from a small town in Colorado, that his parents had died when he was young, that the marshal who had been killed had been the only family he had left. She told him about her father, about growing up on the ranch, about the loneliness of the past 6 months. One evening, as they stood together on watch looking out over the darkened land, Dawson said quietly, "You are the strongest woman I have ever met." Elena laughed, surprised. "Strong? I spend half my time terrified." "That is what makes you strong," Dawson said. "You are terrified, but you keep going anyway. That is the definition of courage." Elena looked at him, at the strong lines of his face in the moonlight, and felt something shift inside her. It was not just gratitude or respect, though there was that. It was something deeper, something she had not felt in a very long time. "Dawson," she said, and her voice came out softer than she intended. He turned to face her fully. "Elena!" They stood there for a long moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Dawson reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I am probably going to regret this," he said, "but I have to tell you, I think I am falling in love with you." Elena's heart hammered in her chest. "That is a terrible idea." "I know," Dawson said. "You are my employer. We are in the middle of a dangerous situation, and we have known each other less than 2 weeks." "Terrible idea." "The worst," Elena agreed. Then she smiled. "I think I am falling in love with you too." Dawson let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "So what do we do about it?" Elena thought about all the reasons they should not do anything, all the sensible, logical reasons to keep things professional and distant. Then she thought about life and death and the fact that tomorrow was never guaranteed, especially not in the middle of a range war. "We do this," she said, and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss, not a tentative first touch. It was fierce and hungry and full of all the emotion they had been holding back. Dawson's arms came around her, pulling her close, and Elena felt like she was coming home to a place she had not known she was looking for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dawson rested his forehead against hers. "That was worth the terrible idea?" Elena suggested. "Absolutely," Dawson said, and kissed her again. They stayed out on watch together that night, talking about everything and nothing, stealing kisses when the mood struck them, and Elena felt happier than she had in months. It was crazy, falling in love in the middle of a crisis, but somehow it felt exactly right. The attack came 3 days later, just before dawn. Elena was on watch, Dawson asleep in the bunkhouse, Ben asleep in the house. She was doing her regular circuit around the property when she heard horses, a lot of them, coming fast from the east. She fired 2 warning shots into the air and ran for the house, shouting at the top of her lungs, "Riders! Riders coming in!" Dawson and Ben tumbled out of their beds, grabbing guns and boots. By the time the riders came into view, all 3 of them were in position. Elena in the ranch house with a rifle, Dawson in the barn, Ben in the storage shed. There were at least 15 men, all armed, all wearing bandanas over their faces. They came in shooting, bullets slamming into wood and adobe, shattering windows. Elena returned fire methodically, picking targets, squeezing the trigger, watching men fall from saddles or wheel their horses away. Dawson was shooting from the barn and Ben from the shed, and the crossfire was devastating. But there were so many of them. They tried to flank the buildings, tried to get close enough to set fires, tried to force their way into the house. The fight went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the air thick with gun smoke and the smell of blood. Then Elena heard more horses coming from the west, and her heart sank. Reinforcements. They were finished. But when the new riders came into view, she saw John Mercer at their head with a dozen men behind him. The neighboring ranchers coming to help just as they had promised. The sight of unexpected resistance broke the attackers. They wheeled their horses and fled, leaving 4 dead men in the dust of Elena's yard. Mercer and his men chased them for a little way, then came back to check on the defenders. "Everyone all right?" Mercer called. Elena stepped out of the house, shaking from adrenaline but unhurt. Dawson emerged from the barn, blood on his left arm but grinning. Ben came out of the shed looking pale but intact. "We are good," Elena said. "Thank you. If you had not come—" "We had men watching the roads," Mercer said. "Figured Garrett would make his move soon. When we saw his men heading this way, we followed." He looked at the bodies in the yard. "This is going to bring trouble, though. Garrett cannot ignore this." "Good," Elena said, and her voice was hard. "I want him to know we are not backing down." They spent the rest of the morning cleaning up. The dead men were loaded onto their horses and sent back toward Garrett's ranch, a message that could not be misunderstood. Then Mercer and his men rode out, promising to keep watch and come running if there was more trouble. Elena found Dawson in the barn, wrapping a bandage around his arm. The wound was not deep, just a graze, but it was bleeding steadily. "Let me," she said, taking over the bandaging. Her hands were gentle as she worked. "Thanks for not saying I told you so," Dawson said with a wry smile. "About what?" "About how dangerous this was going to be, about how I should have taken a nice, safe job on a ranch that was not in the middle of a range war." Elena tied off the bandage and looked up at him. "Would you have taken a safe job somewhere else?" Dawson cupped her face in his hand. "Not for all the money in the world. Not if it meant not meeting you." They kissed, soft and sweet this time, a promise that they would get through this together. The next move came from an unexpected direction. 2 days after the attack, Sheriff Daniels rode out to the ranch with a written order from the territorial judge. James Garrett had filed a complaint claiming that Elena was allowing her cattle to stray onto his land and damage his property. The order required her to either fence her entire ranch or face fines and possible seizure of assets. "This is ridiculous," Elena said, reading the order. "Fencing 2,000 acres would cost more money than I have. Garrett knows that." "Nothing I can do," Daniels said, but he looked uncomfortable. "It is a legal order from a judge. You have 30 days to comply." After the sheriff left, Elena, Dawson, and Ben sat in the kitchen and tried to figure out what to do. "It is a trap," Dawson said. "If you cannot fence the property, Garrett can seize it legally. If you spend all your money trying to fence it, you will go broke and have to sell anyway. There has to be a way out," Ben said. Elena was thinking hard. Her father had always told her that when someone pushed you into a corner, you did not push back the same way. You found a different angle, a different approach. "What if we do not fence the whole property?" she said slowly. "What if we just fence the areas where the cattle actually are? The pastures near the house, maybe 100 acres total. That would be affordable, and it would prove we are making a good faith effort to comply." "The order says fence the entire ranch," Dawson pointed out. "The order says fence or face fines," Elena corrected. "If we fence the critical areas and can show that our cattle are not straying, then Garrett has no grounds for the complaint. And if the judge rules against us anyway, we have proof of bias, which we can take to a higher court." It was not a perfect solution, but it was something. They spent the next 3 weeks building fence, working from dawn to dusk. John Mercer and some of the other ranchers sent men to help, and slowly but surely a sturdy fence went up around the pastures nearest the house. They finished with 2 days to spare before the deadline. Elena rode into Hachita and filed a report with the sheriff showing that she had complied with the spirit of the order, if not the letter. Sheriff Daniels looked over the paperwork and sighed. Garrett is not going to accept this, he warned. I do not care what Garrett accepts, Elena said. I have complied with the law. If he wants to challenge it, he can take it up with the judge. But Garrett did not take it to the judge. Instead, 3 days later, he showed up at Elena's ranch in person. James Garrett was a big man in his 50s, dressed in expensive clothes and riding a magnificent black stallion. He had 2 men with him, both armed, both watching everything with cold eyes. Dawson and Ben stood behind Elena as Garrett dismounted and approached the porch where she waited. Miss Thorne, Garrett said. His voice was smooth, cultured, the voice of a man who was used to getting what he wanted. I think it is time we had a conversation. About what? Elena asked. About reality, Garrett said. You are a young woman alone trying to run a ranch in difficult territory. You have managed to put up some impressive resistance. I will give you that. But this cannot continue. You cannot win. I have won so far, Elena said. Garrett smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You have survived. That is not the same thing. I am prepared to make you a generous offer. I will buy your ranch for twice what it is worth, give you enough money to start over somewhere else, somewhere easier. You can have a good life, Miss Thorne. All you have to do is be reasonable. Reasonable, Elena repeated. Is that what you call intimidation and violence? Reasonable? I call it business, Garrett said. This is a hard land, Miss Thorne. Only the strong survive. Your father understood that. He was strong. But he is gone now, and you are not strong enough to hold this place alone. She is not alone, Dawson said, speaking for the first time. And we are not interested in your offer. Garrett looked at Dawson with cold eyes. You are the new hired gun, I hear. Former deputy. You should know better than to get in the middle of this. Men who cross me do not fare well. Is that a threat? Dawson asked mildly. It is a statement of fact, Garrett said. He turned back to Elena. You have 1 week to think about my offer. After that, I stop being generous. I hope you will make the smart choice. He mounted his horse and rode away, his men following. When they were out of sight, Elena let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. He is going to come at us with everything he has, Ben said. I know, Elena said, but we have held him off this long. We can do it a little longer. That night, lying in Dawson's arms in the privacy of her room where they had been sleeping together for the past week, Elena whispered, What if he is right? What if I am not strong enough? Dawson pulled her closer. You are the strongest person I know, and you do not have to be strong enough alone. We are in this together, remember? Together, Elena repeated, and the word felt like a lifeline. The week passed slowly, each day tense with anticipation, but the attack they expected did not come. Instead, on the 7th day, a lawyer arrived from Santa Fe with papers that changed everything. The lawyer explained that there had been an investigation into the shooting deaths that occurred on Elena's property during the attack. Someone, he would not say who, had provided evidence linking James Garrett directly to the assault. Furthermore, there were new allegations about Garrett's business practices, including fraud, intimidation, and possible murder. A territorial marshal was on his way to arrest Garrett, and in the meantime, all of Garrett's assets had been frozen pending the investigation. Elena sat in stunned silence as the lawyer finished his explanation. Who provided the evidence? She finally asked. The lawyer smiled. Several people, actually. Small ranchers, former employees, even some of Garrett's current men who decided they did not want to hang for his crimes. Once one person spoke up, others found the courage to do the same. It seems you inspired quite a few people, Miss Thorne. After the lawyer left, Elena looked at Dawson and Ben and started laughing. She could not help it. After weeks of fear and fighting, the resolution had come not from guns, but from people standing together and telling the truth. Your father would be proud, Dawson said, pulling her into his arms. You did not just save your ranch. You saved this whole territory from a tyrant. James Garrett was arrested 2 days later. The trial took months, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. He was convicted of multiple crimes and sentenced to 20 years in prison. His ranch and assets were broken up and sold, with some of the proceeds going to the people he had wronged. Life slowly returned to normal for Elena. With the threat gone, she was able to focus on actually running the ranch, building it up, making it profitable. John Mercer and the other small ranchers became friends and allies, creating a loose confederation that helped everyone prosper. Ben stayed on as a trusted hand, eventually taking over as foreman when Elena needed someone to run things day to day, because Elena was going to need help running things. 6 months after Garrett's arrest, she and Dawson were married in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with all their friends and allies present. It was the happiest day of Elena's life, standing beside the man she loved, promising to face whatever the future brought together. They had their first child a year later, a son they named Michael after Elena's father. Dawson proved to be as good a father as he was a husband, patient and loving, and always present. 2 years after that, they had a daughter, Grace, who had her mother's determination and her father's steady temperament. The ranch prospered, with Dawson managing the day-to-day operations and Elena handling the business side. They built the Thorne spread into one of the most successful ranches in New Mexico. They added land, not by stealing it, but by purchasing neighboring properties as they came available. They treated their hands fairly and paid well, which meant they always had good men willing to work for them. On quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the ranch was peaceful, Elena and Dawson would sit together on the porch and watch the sun set over the land. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked one such evening. Giving up the badge, drifting around, ending up here? Dawson pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. Not for a single second. Everything I went through, everything I lost, it brought me here. To you, to this life. I would not change any of it. Elena thought about her father, about his teachings, about how he had prepared her for a life she could not have imagined when he was alive. She thought about the day Dawson had said, "Show me what you know," and how that moment had changed everything. "I love you," she said. "I love you too," Dawson replied. "Forever." They sat together as the stars came out over New Mexico, two people who had found each other in the middle of a war and built something lasting from the ashes. They had fought for their land, fought for their future, and won. But more than that, they had fought for love and discovered that love was the strongest force of all. The years rolled on, bringing changes and challenges, joys and sorrows. They had 2 more children, twin boys named James and Thomas, who were as wild as the land they grew up on. The ranch continued to grow and prosper, becoming a legacy that would last for generations. When Elena was 45, standing at her father's grave on the anniversary of his death, Dawson came up beside her and took her hand. "He would be so proud of you," Dawson said, "of everything you have built, everything you have become." Elena looked at the headstone, simple and weathered by New Mexico winds. "He taught me to fight," she said, "but you taught me what to fight for." "You taught yourself that," Dawson said. "I just gave you someone to fight alongside." They walked back to the ranch house hand in hand, toward the family waiting for them, toward the life they had built together. Behind them, the sun was setting over the land, painting everything in gold and red, a reminder that even the hardest days ended with beauty. And when Elena looked at her husband, at the man who had appeared in her life when she needed him most, she felt a gratitude so deep it was almost overwhelming. They had started with nothing but determination in each other, and they had created something magnificent. Their children grew up strong and capable, learning to work the land, learning to treat people fairly, learning that strength came from standing up for what was right. Michael took over managing the ranch when he was old enough, working alongside his father and mother to keep it thriving. Grace became a teacher, bringing education to the scattered ranches and towns of the territory. The twins went into business together, starting a freight company that served the whole region. Elena and Dawson watched their children flourish with pride and love. They became grandparents multiple times over, and the ranch house was always full of noise and laughter and the chaos of family. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Dawson had a portrait painted of Elena. In it, she was standing in front of the ranch house, wearing her father's Colt revolver, her hand resting on the fence that they had built together all those years ago. It was a portrait of strength and determination, but also of love and accomplishment. "This is how I see you," Dawson said when he showed it to her. "Strong, beautiful, unconquerable." Elena looked at the painting, at the woman she had become, and thought about the scared 22-year-old who had been shot at in the street. So much had changed, and yet at the core, she was still the same person, still fighting for what mattered, still standing strong. "We did it," she said to Dawson. "Everything we dreamed of, everything we hoped for, we did it." "We did," Dawson agreed. "And we are still doing it every single day." They held a big celebration for their anniversary, inviting everyone from the surrounding ranches and the town. There was food and music and dancing, and as Elena watched Dawson dance with their granddaughter, spinning her around while she giggled with delight, she felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This was what her father had wanted for her. Not just survival, but a full and rich life. Not just strength, but love. Not just land, but family. As the party wound down and the guests began to leave, John Mercer, now in his 70s and retired, came up to Elena. "Your daddy would have been mighty proud," he said. "You did not just save your ranch, Elena. You saved all of us. You showed us what courage looks like, what it means to stand up for what is right." "We did it together," Elena said. "I could not have done it alone." "Maybe not," Mercer said. "But you were the spark that started the fire. Do not ever forget that." That night, as Elena and Dawson lay in bed in the room they had shared for 25 years, Elena said, "Do you remember that night when you first told me you were falling in love with me?" "Of course," Dawson said. "You told me it was a terrible idea." Elena laughed. "It was, and it was the best terrible idea either of us ever had." "No arguments there," Dawson said. He pulled her close, her head resting on his chest, his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. "I love you, Elena Thorne Yale. I have loved you from the moment you pointed that revolver at me in the street." "I love you too," Elena said, "more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own adventures and challenges. There were droughts that tested their resolve, winters that pushed them to their limits, market crashes that threatened their prosperity. But they weathered every storm together, leaning on each other, on their family, on the community they had helped build. When Elena was 60, Dawson fell ill with pneumonia. For 2 terrifying weeks, she sat beside his bed, holding his hand, praying to a God she was not sure she believed in, that she would not lose him. Their children gathered, their grandchildren, everyone who loved him, and the ranch house was full of fear and hope in equal measure. And Dawson, stubborn and strong as always, fought his way back. He recovered slowly, and though he was never quite as strong as he had been, he was alive. That was what mattered. "You are not getting rid of me that easily," he told Elena one day, as they sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the winter cold. "I should hope not," Elena said. "I still have plans for us, Yale." "Oh, what kind of plans?" "The kind that involve growing old together, watching our great-grandchildren grow up, and spending every possible moment reminding each other how lucky we are." Dawson smiled and kissed her hand. Those sound like good plans. Let us do that. And they did. They grew old together, their hair turning silver, their faces lining with age, but their love never diminishing. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect, and the kind of intimacy that only decades together could create. When Elena was 73, she developed a cough that would not go away. The doctor diagnosed consumption, the same disease that had taken her father. It was a bitter irony that did not escape her notice. "How long?" she asked the doctor. "Maybe a year," he said gently. "Maybe less. I am sorry, Elena." Elena took the news with the same calm strength she had faced everything else in her life. She gathered her family, told them the truth, and made her peace with what was coming. "I have had a good life," she told Dawson one evening as they sat together watching the sunset. "Better than good. I have had everything I ever wanted and more. I am not afraid." Dawson was crying, tears running down his weathered face. "I am," he said. "I am terrified of losing you." Elena took his face in her hands and kissed him gently. "You are not losing me. I will always be with you, in every corner of this ranch, in our children, in every memory we have made together. Love does not end, Dawson. It just changes form." She lived for 8 more months, surrounded by love every moment. Her children and grandchildren visited constantly, filling the house with laughter and stories. Dawson never left her side, holding her hand through the good days and the bad, talking to her, loving her, making sure she knew she was not alone. On a warm spring morning, with the windows open and the smell of blooming flowers filling the air, Elena Thorne Yale took her last breath. Dawson was holding her hand, and her children were gathered around the bed, and she slipped away peacefully, a smile on her face. They buried her beside her father, overlooking the ranch they had built together. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, a testament to the life she had lived and the impact she had made. People told stories about her courage, her strength, her kindness, her unwavering commitment to justice. Dawson stood at the graveside long after everyone else had left, staring at the fresh earth that covered his wife. He was 80 years old, and he felt every year of it. She had been his partner, his love, his reason for everything. And now she was gone. But as he stood there, feeling the New Mexico sun on his face and the wind in his hair, he realized something. She was not really gone. She was in the land around him, in the ranch they had built, in the children and grandchildren who carried on their legacy. She was in every fence post they had set together, every sunrise they had watched, every moment of joy and sorrow they had shared. "I love you," he whispered to the wind. "And I will see you again when my time comes." Dawson lived for 3 more years, cared for by his children, surrounded by family. He spent his days on the porch Elena had loved, looking out over the ranch, remembering. And when his time came, when his old heart finally gave out, he went peacefully, a smile on his face, reaching for Elena in the darkness. They buried him beside her, 2 headstones side by side, 2 people who had loved each other through everything. The inscription on Elena's stone read, "She fought for what she loved." The inscription on Dawson's read, "He loved what he fought for." Their children carried on the ranch, passing it down to their own children in turn. The Thorne spread became legendary in New Mexico, not just for its size or success, but for the story of how it had been saved. The story of a young woman who refused to back down, who learned to fight from her father's teachings, and who met a cowboy who said, "Show me what you know." It became a love story told around fires and at gatherings, a reminder that sometimes the strongest force in the world is not guns or money or power, but 2 people who stand together against the darkness and refuse to let go of each other. And in the end, that is exactly what Elena and Dawson had done. They had stood together, fought together, loved together, and built something that lasted long after they were gone. Their legacy was not just land or money or success. It was family, community, and the unwavering belief that love and justice were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And on quiet evenings, when the sun sets over the New Mexico desert and the wind blows through the grass, some people swear they can still see two figures standing together on the old ranch porch, hand in hand, watching over the land they loved and the family they created. Together, forever, the way they always wanted to be.